Hello. So this is us going live with divorce mediators. This is my first time doing a live, so please forgive me as I navigate this for the first time. And so I'm just going to wait. We have somebody joining us today, a friend who's a therapist, and we're going to be talking about some good stuff. So we'll just wait for him to log in so that I can add him. So I guess Instagram is telling people that I'm here and that I'm going live so that you can all come and join us. Hopefully you're all doing well. All right, so here he is. This here. Oh. Okay, so Fabrice, I'm trying to get you to join. There we go. And hopefully now you're going to pop up and join the conversation. Let's give it a second. Connecting. There we go.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, no worries. Hi, Fabrice.
Hi, David.
How are you today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm good. Thank you for joining me. I think this is the first live for both of us.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Is this your first time using Instagram?
Yes, it is.
Okay, there you go. All right. So we're opening you up to new experiences across the board today. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome.
So just by way of introduction for those of you joining us, I can hear some clicking. Where's that coming from? Can you hear that, Fabrice?
No, I'm not hearing any clicking. I don't know. I'll put on my...
Okay. Okay, we'll just wait. I don't know if Fabrice is frozen or freezing. Okay,
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you, and that's better.
Is the clicking still there?
No, I think it might have been just the headphones or something. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So I just want to introduce both of us and allow people to get to know us a little bit. So my name is David Dowling. I am a professional family mediator with the California Family Mediation Center here in Orange County and partner with the San Diego Family Mediation Center down in San Diego. Grateful for the opportunity to be talking with a friend of mine today about how to process and cope with emotional pain from divorce. So my background is after law school, I specialized in mediation and dispute resolution at the Strauss Institute up in Pepperdine and learned a lot about kind of psychology of conflict and dealing with pain through mediation and through the mediation process. A couple of years ago, I left teaching full-time as a full-time professor and joined with Amanda and Jen. And so I'm excited to be part of this community. So Fabrice is a friend of mine and I invited him to join me today. So Fabrice, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, David. And I'm delighted to be on this with you for my first experience. Yeah, I'm a psychotherapist, so I help people deal with all sorts of things emotional, including emotional pain quite a bit. And that's me in a very, very short nutshell.
Okay, so I can hear an accent. I know where it's from. So why don't you tell us where you're originally from?
Yeah, I was born and raised in Paris, so I spent the first 20 years of my life there, and then lived in a few other countries, and then moved to the U.S. in 1995, and I've been in the U.S. since then.
95. Okay, wonderful. And I'm actually from Dublin, Ireland, and I lived there till I was 21, then lived in some other countries, and I moved to the US in 99. So Fabrice and I are both implants here. We're both Europeans. I think very grateful for the opportunities that we've been afforded since living in the US and here in Southern California. But so you might hear slight accents. His is a little bit more defined than mine. But so we're grateful for the opportunity. I think we've got a couple of people watching us. So let's jump straight in. And so Fabrice, let me ask you, in your practice, what are the kind of folks who do you help? Who do you work with?
Oh, generally speaking, I mean, outside of this this topic that we're dealing with today, I help teens, adults, couples, and families in general. Dealing with emotional pain, relationships, mastery, and meaning, kind of in a very broad picture, that's what I do. And can you share a little bit about
Right.
your practice and what you do and how you work? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that like our main focus is on family and divorce mediation. Can you not hear me? Can you hear me now? Fabrice? Can you hear me? Is it me or
not very well? It's on and off.
Oh, okay. I'm wondering if one of us just has a bad connection here. I'm gonna check. Rachel, can you just let me know if I know Rachel's on here watching us? So let's see if she can tell us if she's got a good connection. Let me just check.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure that if we're going to record this, let's make sure that people can actually see it and there's no see. Now you're back. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, and now I can hear you really well.
Okay, yeah, it's just okay. So Rachel says we're good. So our practice, we focus on dealing with helping couples and assisting them through all different stages. So we do premarital mediation. So couples that are thinking about and anticipating getting married, helping them to think about finances, planning for the future, some issues that can come up and kind of working through doing a prenuptial agreement if that's something that's necessary. We work with couples and families that are married and that are struggling and want to approach, instead of kind of doing counseling, maybe working with the counselor, but also then in partnership with a mediator. And we specifically then assist couples who are going through divorce. So we do the entire process from start to finish so that they don't have to go to court. They don't have to see a judge. They're able to sit down and work together with a trained mediator. And so that's essentially what we do. Part of what we offer our clients is this kind of a relationship. So when people come and meet with me, I talk to them about, do they have a therapist? I had a woman in here yesterday and I said, do you have a therapist? Are you working with somebody to help you through this process? We talk to them about realtors, we talk to them about financial advisors. And I think there's got to be a community, a partnership that we can assist these folks when they're going through this. So you specifically deal with then on the therapy end of things. And as you said, you work with couples, you work with single individuals, and you work with children. In thinking about the divorce process and thinking about some of the emotional elements that go along with that, what are some things that you've seen in your practice as people come to you? What are some of the reasons behind the pain when people come to you?
Oh, yeah. And with regards to, I've done quite a bit of work with people who are going through a process of divorcing and, seeing a lot of pain. I mean, usually there's anger, but underneath the anger is a lot of pain. And so, helping folks deal with that and working with that. And of course, we feel pain. I mean, in some ways, that's the price we have to pay for feeling love as well. And so that's the price we pay for being human in some ways.
Yeah, I love that. It's true. When we love, we also have to understand that pain comes along with that because of those relationships, because we're willing to open ourselves up to new experiences and open ourselves up to others to make those connections. Through those connections, we will, on some level, experience some kind of pain. And then, of course, there's that ultimate pain, which is betrayal or realizing that the marriage isn't going to work, which can be a struggle for people. Mm-hmm. When they come to you, what are some things that you do in helping these couples?
All right, so most of the couples who come to see me because they want to stay together. So that may be a little bit different population from yours. Most of the time I deal when there's a divorce process, I do a little bit of help with co-parenting, but I deal mostly with processing the shock, the pain, and helping people in some ways, in lots of cases, kind of build a new life from scratch.
Yeah, people come in and they're unsure, they're uncertain of what's next, right? And that's got to be a big trauma for them to think about what their next step is going to be like, what their life will be like after this is complete.
Yeah, and usually, I mean, usually it goes deeper than that in terms of there's also doubt about who am I?
Mhm.
And there's also usually doubt about, what's my worth? Am I worthy or am I not? So these are things that, and these are, of course, very legitimate questions that come to our mind. And so I help with that, and when help looking at actually what is going on, and then bring some good answers to those questions. Because usually there's a great tendency to think that something's wrong with us, that we're a failure. Um, and so it's really helpful for folks to walk along that road with a guide who show them, oh, this is what's happening, this is what happened, and no, you're not a failure, and this is what we can learn and move forward and build what feels in some ways like a new life.
Right. I mean, it's common to all of us, right? When we go through some kind of negative experience, to look introspectively and think about, what have I done? What have I contributed? How did I fail? This has to be a personal failure on me.
Mm-hmm.
There's something that I didn't see, didn't do, didn't connect with. And so what am I doing wrong? And take on a lot of responsibility. When people come into you with that kind of trauma, uh, I love how you said it's good for them to walk along that path with somebody who has experience and somebody who can help them, lead them along that path.
Mm-hmm.
What are some things that you advise, or that you've worked in doing with assisted people when they're on that path?
Yeah, I mean, the first recommendation that I have is connect. I mean, it can be a therapist, but it can be a good friend. Is just don't stay isolated, because doing these things isolated is just a tremendous burden. I don't think we're designed for that. So first recommendation is really connect with people who are actually supportive.
Right.
Second recommendation that I have is doing some mindfulness work can be really helpful. And so there, you can connect with some mindfulness resources if need be, or there's a book an author that I sometimes recommend to by the folks who are going through a divorce. I get good return from books from Eckhart Tolle, who is teaching people to helping people be in the present, because in these moments of great pain and great suffering, our mind goes to all sorts of places, and sometimes it helps to enjoy little moments where we're just present and enjoy what's in front of us, as opposed to doing our perpetual problem solving that doesn't work. And then trying to take good care of our human system by having the proverbial good self-care, which is really important, even though it doesn't feel that way.
Yeah, I think if you look at the year that we've all experienced together, right? And this as well as I do. I connect with my family back in Ireland, and these problems are not isolated here to the US, to our local community. People all over the world are experiencing this, and in times of struggle, in times of uncertainty, we tend to then neglect ourselves. We tend to feel overwhelmed and not take care of ourselves. We tend to, that's when we pick up bad habits, or we eat poorly. We neglect ourselves in different ways. And you're right. One of the things that can make a difference is if we're taking care of ourselves, if we feel healthy within ourselves, we'll feel more positive, and we'll make better connections and seek better options for ourselves in times of trauma.
Yeah, and there's sometimes it can be a little delicate in terms of when we are going through a lot of trauma, our we feel we can have very low energy, so it can become a little harder to do the things that our system needs to thrive. But it's really important to do it, and I recommend starting with little things. It doesn't have to be a monumental, complete program of self-care, but inject a little bit here and there, little activities that go in the right direction.
Yeah, I say to people, it's important to think about yourself and how to find peace, right? And it starts with small things. right? I always think about going to my happy place, wherever that is for different people, is finding that place where you feel you can take a break from the stresses of life, right? And I've heard so many, it's funny, my wife says this, and so many people that I've worked with will say, for some of them, it's their car, right? When they get in the car, there's no kids, there's no, work stresses, there's no house stresses, there's no spouse, whatever it might be. And so that time alone in their car can give them an opportunity to reflect and think and to work through some of their feelings. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it can be something as simple as your car, or for some folks, actually your bed.
Yeah.
Or for some folks, I mean, the list is infinite, but a warm bath, a nice, sunset, a TV, Netflix series. And I also recommend, in situations like that, when the grief is overwhelming and the trauma is overwhelming, is that every now and then there will be a little window where the grief recedes a little bit. And where we can just for a moment enjoy, the little things. So when that happens, my recommendation is, enjoy the little things while it lasts, and knowing that, the grief will come back. But just, injecting little pieces of wellness here and there is really important.
Yeah, I love that you talk about Netflix. Like my go-to thing when I'm not feeling great is to, I have to find a show that makes me laugh. I have to find something that takes my mind away from, the stresses, and not watching somebody else's drama doesn't do it for me. Watching something that makes me laugh, that makes me smile, that creates some of those endorphins in me, that lifts my spirits. And I think it's interesting because you're right. There are so many different ways in which we can find peace and find comfort, because you're right. There are ways, there are stages that people are going to go through as they're working through this process. And so identifying whatever works best for them is really what matters. There's no one size fits all.
One thing that I want to add on this whole process is that, in my experience, and that's also autobiographical as well, is that we tend to think that there's something wrong with us for being in pain. And actually, no. I mean, we're in pain because we're going through something painful, something that's really painful to humans.
Yeah, it's true. One of the things that you and I have talked a little bit about, and I know part of your practice involves working with children. So as a parent, so both of us are parents, as a parent, when you recognize and understand that there's trauma going on in the family, in your community, whatever it might be, and you can see that trickle down to the children, right? Because sometimes we think, okay, the children don't know, they don't understand. One of the things that we're really good at doing is saying, well, our kids don't know that this is happening, right? And I remember I had a conversation with some friends recently, and I said, my wife and I will be sitting there around the house, whatever else, and we'll start getting frustrated with each other about something, and one of our kids will say, hey, don't argue. And I'm like thinking, this isn't us arguing, this is us just disagreeing about something. The arguments come later when you're not around. But I think that we have this idea in our head that the children don't understand. They're not connected to what's happening in the house. But that's not true. Would you agree?
In my experience, children are really connected to our emotional states. So when something is not right emotionally, it can be really therapeutic for the kids if the parents can put some words that don't make the child question their judgment on reality. So in other words, acknowledging what's going on. And of course, there's better ways to do that, things that, convey a sense of protection to the children versus ways that, convey to the children that all hell is going to break loose and it's the end of the world. And I don't recommend doing that. But one of the things that I notice, because that's coming to my mind right now as we're having this conversation, is, the kids are really good at picking up emotional vibes. And so I think it's really important to, in some ways, be truthful.
Right.
And couch our truth in terms that are nurturing, in terms that are nurturing to the child, but acknowledging what's happening.
Yeah, I talk about that in as I train mediators, I say recognize the negative feelings in the room. So when you're working with people and mediating a case, recognize when people are angry or frustrated or feeling emotional, whatever it might be. I love that you say to do that with our children. So recognize that these things are happening, talk with them and work through it. Now, you said that there are good ways and bad ways, right? So what are some of the bad ways that you've seen people approach conversations with their children that are not healthy or not productive?
Yeah, I mean, I would call them, not necessarily. I mean, I would call them not very healthy, which is,
Healthy, yeah.
yeah, the role of a parent in my mind is to provide some safety to kids and be actually an emotional provider. And so what I would recommend against is putting our kids in the role of emotionally providing for us. I think in times of stress, it can be very easy to forget that. But yeah, our kids are not there to be our confidant. They are there to receive our protection, our love, and our safety, and so much as we have it. So that's kind of what's coming up to mind with regards to your question.
Yeah, it is something that we do, right? Is that we turn to this other human, this other soul in the house, and we pull them in and make them our person, our go-to person to talk to share our frustrations because they're there and they listen, right? But you're right, it can be a very unhealthy thing and very unproductive thing, and placing a burden on a child that they don't need. They have their own stresses and own anxieties, and they have their own issues with what's going on in the house or in the world. Adding our stresses and anxieties to those, it's not healthy.
Right, and so for me, there's a difference between turning to our kids for turning to our kids as confident for comfort versus sharing with our kids from a place of caring towards our kids. There are some stressful things going on, and it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah. Let me ask you, in thinking about children and these conversations, I often have couples that will come in and say to me, we know we want to get a divorce. We don't know how to tell the children, right? And that's a big hurdle for them, is how to help their children who are various ages understand what mom and dad are about to start or go through. What suggestions would you have to create a healthy environment around that conversation?
Yeah, I mean, of course, each of these is really situation specific, but kind of a couple broad themes come to mind. First one is it's really important to not point fingers between the parents. I mean, that's because then otherwise it puts the child in an awful position of having to side with one parent against the other. Now, of course, what I'm saying is out the window. If there's some serious physical abuse, then the situation is very bad. But if people are trying to move forward and try to raise healthy children, I'm not going to say together, but jointly co-parent. It's really important to when explaining to kids, not put anybody's it's not anybody's fault. Second thing that comes to mind is that kids will naturally think that it's their fault somehow. So I think it's really important to reassure the kids that no, it's not their fault. If it happens that it actually, for one of the parents, it was the kid's fault, I would really recommend getting therapy for the parent.
Right.
Other thing that comes to mind is kids will then naturally want to try to fix things. So I think it can be helpful to let kids know that no, they can't fix it. It's not their fault. They can't fix it. Third thing that comes to mind is kids in some ways are gonna feel, in all likelihood, I mean, unless there's an abusive situation, in which case what I'm saying is out the window. But kids are probably going to feel like their world is crumbling in some ways, because as humans we have something called attachment that's been beautifully researched, in which there's a sense of life and death with regards to having a secure, loving figure to whom we can turn to. And so for kids, it's the mom and dad. I mean, it's actually in the research it's studied separately, mom or dad, but it's in my experience, it's viewed as a whole, entity of attachment. And so being mindful that when we break up this entity, the child may feel like they may lose their attachment and be abandoned, and that the world is going to be super dangerous. So reassure the child and make a commitment to self, actually, of, being there for the child, and sharing that with the child when we're having the discussion about divorce.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I really appreciate that you kept emphasizing there is that it is situational specific, right? There's no one way of approaching this. It really depends on the parents. It depends on the facts and circumstances surrounding the divorce, what's brought them to that point. And then the children, it depends on their age. It depends on their emotional stability, right? So we have to consider all of those factors before approaching any conversation like this. From my perspective, I think that one of the things parents should do is prepare for it by talking with somebody like you, coming to mediation, thinking about what's happening in their circumstances, and then when is the right time and how to approach this with the children to ensure that the children, as you've said, understand that there's still a sense of security. There's still protection going to be provided for them, right? That this isn't their fault, that they will continue to be loved. Somebody said it a long time ago, and I share it all the time with couples, and when I'm working with them, I say, you're divorcing, mom and dad are divorcing, but that doesn't mean it's an end of the family, right? Because we're still parents to these children. They still have mom, they still have dad. Mom and dad are no longer husband and wife, but there's still a mom and a dad in this family situation. And I talk to people all the time, so I'm 48 years old, aging myself, and I just this morning, I called my mother and father in Ireland, and I chatted with them. And so, our children are part of our lives forever, and they'll be part of the other person's life forever. And so we need to remember that. When I was mediating cases for the courts in Riverside and Orange County, I did a lot of restraining order cases, and it involved exes who get mad and angry with each other and end up in really ugly situations out of these emotions that they have for each other coming from their negative relationships, right? And what you end up is with children being put in the middle of these circumstances. Usually it comes to a boiling point with the exchange of the children, so pick up and drop off, whatever it might be. And I would often stand there with these folks and say, do you understand that you're modeling behaviors for your children? So when you engage in negative conflict, when you engage in conflict around them and negative behaviors around them, you're modeling patterns of behavior, and your children are watching that and learning from that, and that's how they're going to respond in their own relationships in life. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think when that happens, two things are happening. I mean, I think you're right on. One is there is modeling occurring, and two, it really sends the message to the child that the attachment unit is, upon which their life actually depends, is disintegrating completely. So it's great, all sorts of alarm bells ring up in our systems when we're confronted to that as kids.
Yeah. I mean, it's difficult.
And I like what you said about what you said earlier. And one thing that parents can add is that we're divorcing each other, but we're not divorcing you.
Right. We're still a family. We're still a family. We're still a family unit. And, I emphasize for parents time and time again, the children are going to have their own struggles. And it's important and essential that the parents find some way to communicate with each other around the children, so that they're there for the children, so that when the children experience problems, if one parent in one household recognizes a pattern or a behavior that starts to develop, that they should be able to reach out to the other parent and talk to them and engage with them, so that they can help and support the child in both households.
Oh, I agree very much. So, I mean, I encourage folks who are going through a divorce of trying to keep some line of communication open. And I do know that, especially at the beginning, it can be very painful, but for the sake of the kids, it's really important at some point to reach a point where we can share with the co-parent some of the things that are important that are happening in our kids' life. And we don't have to be best friends with our ex-spouse, but even business-like communication for the sake of the kids, I think is a wonderful service that people can do.
Yeah, so we've actually got a question that I think this is a good one. How do you handle a situation when one parent is on board with positive co-parenting and a positive co-parenting relationship, but the other parent badmouths the other parent? So there's negative behavior going on.
Yeah. Uh, uh, yeah, I mean, several things come to mind. And again, it'd be helpful to open the hood a little bit and see what's going on. If some work can be done with the other co-parent in terms of trying to, for the sake of the kid, the children, trying to maybe get a commitment to do some co-parenting, and maybe third party can be helpful. That's one thing that's coming up. If that avenue is not open, then I recommend doing and I don't know if this is are these places where you guys you can help from a legal perspective, or there's no avenue on your end?
It's hard with and that's a great question, because oftentimes people will come in and say, look, what can I do? The other parent, in a joint session, they'll ask for this as part of an agreement. Will you please not speak negatively about me around the children? And it's a tough one, because the courts can't enforce something like that. It's not like the court can come in and say, be nice to the other parent or else, right? And what I recently I chatted with a couple, and I kind of said, look, you're in the kitchen talking with whomever and having a conversation, and you're frustrated about something that's going on with the other parent, and you feel like you're expressing this in a private setting, but the children are around, they can hear. One thing to consider is that child sees themselves as part of both of you. And so the negative attributes and qualities that you're discussing or describing in the other parent, the child sees themselves as part of that. And so, and oftentimes you'll have children where a lot of people will say, oh, you look exactly like your mom, or you look exactly like your dad, or you're just exactly like this parent. You're exactly. So when the other parent starts talking negatively about them, the children can take on ownership of those negative attributes, right? And I remind parents about this. Like, would you want somebody telling your child your worst things, or telling them the worst things about you, your worst attributes? Would you want your child to sit down and learn about these facts and learn these things about you? And they say no. I said, well, when you badmouth or when you talk negatively about the other parent, your former spouse, that's how it feels for the child. Like somebody they love and trust is sharing some things about somebody that they love and trust, and that can be hurtful.
Yeah, I mean, if you in your position, of mediator can share that message with both parents, that I think, yeah, I mean, I'm kudos to that. I was still thinking about the question, if all these remedies don't work and nothing can be done about, the other parent bad mouthing, doing some bad mouthing, I think as a parent, trying to keep our integrity and do the best that we can with the child when we have him or her. And show them by example, the right way to nurture a human being. In my experience, more often than not, this pays high dividends. Maybe not immediately, but down the road. And there's been cases in which the parent who badmouths the other parent for no good reason, 10 years down the road, the child decides to not have anything to do with that parent.
Yeah, you're right. It can backfire. It can result in a damaged relationship between the parent who's doing the bad mouthing and the child, because they see this negativity and they don't want to be a part of it. And as we grow and mature, and this is true for all of us, our relationships with our parents change, right? We see them in different ways. So you have a situation where a child might believe negative comments from one parent, but as they grow and mature, they start to see really bad patterns of behavior from the parent who's bad mouthing, and they start to recognize maybe some negative traits, some mental health issues, whatever it might be in that individual and in that parent, and start to then find that the relationship with the other parent becomes stronger and healthier. And so it can backfire and create problems. Let me ask you, one of the things that I get as part of our discussion is the idea of putting children in therapy, because children there does come a point where children need help and need assistance. They need an avenue outside of that parent-child relationship, somebody to talk with, a professional like yourself. But there that can lead to conflict within divorced relationships, divorced couples, about one parent feeling the need for a child to speak to somebody who's a professional and the other parent seeing it as some kind of alienation opportunity or some kind of opportunity to poison the well, whatever it might be. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, I haven't thought about that, so I'm gonna think live about this one. I'm assuming from a legal perspective, there's nothing that can be done, right? In those
You
cases.
know, I mean, the thing is that through the courts, and especially right now, since COVID, it's very lengthy and difficult to get in and get a hearing before a judge. You know, the courts want to support the parents and they want to ensure that the child is safe and protected. So the courts will do whatever's necessary. But where one parent is saying, I want a child to see a therapist, and the other parent's not, it can be a very difficult decision for the judge to evaluate
Okay.
what the best thing is. Because what the courts ultimately want is the parents to work together for the best interests of the child. And it does happen, the courts will step in, the courts will make a decision, but they would rather not
Hmm.
parent or make decisions for parents.
Yeah, so I don't have a good answer for your initial question. You know, the only thing that a couple of things come to mind right now. One is, I don't know if that can be helpful, but getting the parent who does not want therapy, giving that parent some reassurance that therapy is not about taking sides, but is really about the benefit of the child. So if somehow that message can go through, I mean, that can be helpful. And the other thing that comes to mind, and again, it's not a direct response, but a direct answer is if the child at the end of the day cannot be given access to therapy, is for the parent who want therapy for the child to try to see if they can get some recommendations from therapists, maybe on a regular basis, and provide some support that way.
Yeah, I love it. You know, one thing as you were talking there that occurred to me is getting buy-in from the other parent. So having them as part of the process. So instead of kind of saying, I've identified this therapist and I think that the child needs to go talk to this therapist, maybe having both parents meet with the therapist beforehand, sit down,
Oh, yes.
ask questions,
Yes.
give both parents, the parent who disagrees with therapy, an opportunity to think about the child, think about their unique circumstances, what's going on in the child's life, maybe what's going on with the parents or between the parents, so that the therapist can understand and explain to both parents why it might be helpful for the child. So coming from that neutral perspective rather than the other parent, where there is conflict between the two parents, having a neutral perspective from a therapist who can provide guidance or understanding as to whether it is necessary, because it's possible that a therapist might say, look, here's some things that I would recommend. Here's a program maybe to get your child into, not
That
necessarily
too.
needing
Yeah,
therapy, but they could
absolutely.
provide resources for the parents to try some steps to try before going to the final step of doing therapy with the child. So if one parent is against it and one parent's in favor of it, talking to somebody in the community who can advise them and give them some practical steps to take so that they can find the right path forward for that child.
Yeah, that sounds right on point.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, I'm just thinking as we go along.
Hmm.
So looking then to the parents, right? As I said, when I meet with couples, when I'm talking with couples, one of the first things I do is ask them if they are each meeting with the therapist. Something that I've come across recently a few times is that they'll meet with a therapist for couples counseling, and then one of them wants to stay with the therapist and the other one's trying to find a therapist. What do you suggest in circumstances like that where they've both met with one therapist? Can one continue meeting with that therapist? Should they both find their own separate new therapists? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean, my first reaction is it's going to vary by situation. But
Mm-hmm.
if two people see a therapist jointly and one wants to stop and the other wants to continue, ideally, I like to ask the permission from the person who stops the therapy, to ask them, is it okay?
Mm-hmm.
If I continue with that person.
Mm-hmm.
And take it from there.
Okay.
What I usually don't like doing is doing therapy with a two, and then doing individual therapy with one, and then doing individual therapy with the other. That I shy away from.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
What are some of the issues, like, you just said you shy away from it, because I know that there can be situations where, a couple is seeing a therapist, like let's say a couple comes, sees you, they both feel comfortable with you, they both enjoy talking to you, they both feel there's a connection there. They realize that couples therapy isn't the right thing for them. They need to do something different, but they both come to you and they both want to use you as their therapist because they feel that individually, I feel like I've got a better connection with you than she does. She says, I feel like I've got a better connection with you than he does. Can I continue seeing you? How do you handle something like that?
Sorry, can you rephrase? I'm not sure I'm following. Sorry.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is that, I can imagine, I could see a circumstance where you're meeting with a couple, both of the people in the relationship feel a connection with you. Both of them feel like you get them, you understand them, but they realize that couples therapy isn't right for them anymore. Maybe they know that they're going to get a divorce, but each of them approaches you separately and asks you to continue being their own separate therapist. How do you handle something like that? How do you tell somebody, I like you, but I don't want to be with you anymore as a therapist?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's some situations in which I, share with the person my recommendation is to see somebody else.
Okay.
And it depends on the situation, but and I've never had the situation that you presented me with, so I'm kind of speculating on this one. But if my assessment and my heart is that it's not therapeutic for me to see someone, I share it and make recommendations, referrals of other people.
Okay, good. And let me ask you, when you are working with a couple and you start to notice certain traits or tendencies, narcissistic behaviors from one spouse, and the other spouse is concerned about continuing in therapy together, how do you work specifically with behavioral problems like that, with individuals with mental health issues, how do you handle situations like that?
All right, so if the couples therapy is continuing, sometimes I make referrals for individual therapy with another therapist. If the couples therapy is not continuing, then there's a choice. As we talked earlier about whether to continue therapy with one of the two, and whether it's okay with the other one. And then depending on what kind of issues I'm dealing with, I either take on the cases myself, or I refer out if I feel like it's outside of my scope.
Okay, all right. Now let me ask you. When you are working with a couple, and at the top of the session, you said you work with couples to keep them together, right? And my therapist friends, that's what their job is couples go to them to
that's
make
what
every
we're trying
effort.
to do.
Yeah, right. Like help them work through the problems instead of they come in and you go, yeah, this is a bit of a mess. Go see a divorce mediator.
Yeah.
But do you ever find yourself in the process kind of helping them come to that conclusion that this isn't working anymore, or do you let them reach that kind of point in the conversation?
All right, that's a good question. I haven't had a point yet where we've reached that conclusion that going separate ways is what needs to be. What I have had happen is couples coming to me where one couple has already completely decided in their mind that they want to walk away, and so they're just seeking couples therapy to deliver the news, the blow to the other person.
Okay.
So that I've seen that. But I still want to answer your question more fully, which is, yeah, I mean, I think in my heart, I have a soft spot for, if there is material for people to stay together and build a happy life together, there's a soft spot in my heart for showing that path available to folks, especially if there's kids. but at the same time, I'm actually not wedded to people staying together, even if, I've got a soft spot in my heart for that. So sorry, I'm not communicating that very well, but yeah, my job is not to, tell people you should do this or you should do that, but, show paths and see which ones they want to take.
Right, right. And I think that's important. Usually when people come to my office, 99% of the time, they've come to the conclusion that they are going to get a divorce. In rare circumstances, I have people that come in, sit down and say, we're going to get a divorce, and then say, okay, maybe we want to reconcile, maybe we want to stay together. And at that point, I say, okay, well, let's have you talk to a therapist. Let's have you go meet with somebody that can help you think about this and think about what's happening in this relationship. Sometimes people will ask me to do some mediation sessions because as part of that process, there are things that they need to work on in a different way that they feel maybe mediation can assist them with. It's fascinating because I agree with you. Even though my practice is family and divorce mediation, I wish every couple, could figure out a way to work through things, but I understand, and from my experience and from my job, that it's not right for everybody. Marriage, it's not marriage in this situation, marriage in this relationship is not right. And so they need to consider a healthier way forward.
I think you're right. I mean, I think there are situations and I guess, maybe it's a byproduct of, who chooses to see me in my office, but because I haven't seen that in my office, but I think you're absolutely right. There are some situations in which divorce is the right thing, the right move.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you, in thinking about when people come in, because obviously people come to you, they're experiencing trauma or difficulty in their relationship and in their marriage. When a couple comes into you, or when they come to meet with you, what are some things that you would suggest that they do in considering a therapist or considering therapy? What are suggestions that you would have for them?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm going to share a little bit about my own experience, and that's filtered, of course, through my personality and who I am. So, to be taken with a grain of salt. But, at the heart of hearts, I think what really heals and helps people move forward in therapy is having the repeated experience of being listened to and appreciated, even when they share things that they're ashamed about. I mean, at the heart of heart, this is, I think, the core of how therapy works. So there's other things that are important in therapy, such as, gaining an understanding of, how our human system works, what helps us thrive, what helps us not thrive, what the constructive relationship looks like, et cetera, things like that. So my recommendations in looking for a therapist is, so there's two sets of criteria. There's formal criteria. There's a therapist have a license, does he or she have expertise in the field in question, which are important and necessary. But there's also this more fuzzy criteria of, is the therapist really conveying that they care, that they're open, and that they're appreciating us and that they're not judgmental. So my recommendation, and these are things that we can feel, especially when in moments of calm, I think we have access to the truth detector in ourselves. So my recommendation is that's all right, and then proceed from there. And by the way, to interview therapists, just ringing one up and sharing a little bit about. I know when people call me, I've never heard of them. I ask them, how can I be of help? And sharing a little bit about, what's going on, and then, evaluating the therapist's response is, a great way to interview therapists.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's important because if you're going to go through this process, you want to work with somebody that you feel comfortable with, that you feel can help you navigate the path ahead. And so you have to be able to go with your gut instinct, right? I like that you said, have a conversation, share a little bit about what you're experiencing, and then the response that you get can help you to think, is this the right person for us to help us move forward? Okay.
Absolutely.
I like that. Yeah. I mean, it's tough, right? Because the the process, the path ahead can feel like a minefield, right? You take the wrong step and something's going to explode, and it's going to cause more pain and more harm, right? And really what people are doing is they're trying to figure out how to move forward, to find the right path and find the right tools and resources, right? And so therapy can make a difference. Therapy can provide that assistance when they're experiencing pain and trauma, and help them to work together, help them to find a way to a new understanding, right? To learn about each other, these new individuals, these new people that they've become through these experiences, rather than trying to find the person that was there 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? Because that person has changed, right? That person's no longer the person that you're married to. We grow, we evolve in the process of life and in marriage. And so I think sometimes people are looking back and kind of going, well, this is who I married, and I'm trying to help them understand, that person's no longer the person anymore, because they've been shaped by the marriage, by the experiences in the marriage, by life in general. So don't look back, think about this new relationship moving forward.
Yeah, and the thoughts that pop up in my mind when you share that are two categories. One is there's some grieving associated with that. Mm-hmm. So dedicate. It's usually not that formal, but it's okay to allocate some time for grieving of what is not anymore. And the second thought that popped up as you were sharing these things with me was, especially at the beginning when you said things seem unsurmountable, my recommendation is, in situations of crisis, let's think about the present moment and about just the one next step. Mm-hmm. And if we can take that one next step, we're okay. We don't have to think about 35 steps ahead.
Right, one step at a time, just taking that one step. I mean, this is a difficult thing for people to go through. How we both encounter people. In your practice, it's people coming to you in trauma and in pain because of their relationships with others, their relationships with those around them, in their marriage, whatever it might be. And so they want to work through that, and they want to work through that pain. In my practice, I get people who've come to a very difficult and painful decision that they now need to separate and divorce. And so they have to process that. And, it's interesting, something that you said there is, people view this from such a big picture, and sometimes I say to them, okay, let's focus on each step. Let's focus on the one piece that we can handle and we can deal with right now. Let's not look down the line. Let's not think about what's next week or next year. Let's focus on the here and now, get you through this stage, through this part of the process, because there's a lot of anxiety that can go along with feeling overwhelmed by everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on. I mean, when we're in that state of mind, usually the way the mind works is that I don't want to go into a long explanation, but for evolutionary reasons, our mind is exquisitely attuned to potential dangers. And so when we are in situations of trauma and crisis, when we're out of the shock, we are in that frame of mind in which we're scanning for things that are negative. And so we tend to be attracted to all overwhelming things that can happen. And so in those cases, when we plan ahead, or when we try to plan ahead, our brain filters everything through the worst case scenarios and negatively, and so it becomes overwhelming. So in those situations where our system is overwhelmed to begin with, I think it's really helpful to just think, one step at a time and one day at a time.
Yeah, I see this with couples when it comes to finances and or the parenting plan. Okay, they start to think big picture, and they start to lose it and feel like they're spiraling because what's going to happen next year? How am I going to be able to do this? How am I going to be able to afford this? How am I going to, and I kind of say, okay, let's address that when we reach that point, right? There are so many steps between here and there. What we need to do is kind of walk through those steps one at a time. And my guess is as we go through that process, it will help shape the future. It'll help you feel more comfortable. And I love it when people come back to me and they kind of say, okay, I can't believe I'm here. I feel better here than I thought I was going to 6 months ago or a year ago, right? So I'm here at this point now, and I'm actually in a better place. I feel healthier, I feel stronger. Whereas 6 months or 12 months before, they felt like they were lost. They felt like they were, they were drowning, and nobody was throwing them any assistance, to help them in that moment, and they didn't know what was going to happen. And I use those situations and circumstances to help current clients understand, like, look, you're not the only person that's gone through this. Your facts and circumstances are unique to you. But what you have to understand is that there's a process, there's a way for dealing with this and addressing the pain and the anxiety that you're going through. So let's address each piece of it individually instead of taking it all on in one big chunk.
Yeah, very much so. And if you think it helps, add, and right now your brain is gonna, evaluate things negatively and imagine the bleakest future. So that's normal. Yeah, and you're right. I mean, at least in my office, what you're describing in terms of what's happening 6 months down the road is spot on.
Yeah.
In terms of, I mean, these things are really not fun to go through, but when we go through them, at least, again, relating my experience in my office, people come out of it in actually really good positions afterwards.
Yeah, I say to people, so we do free consultation. So when people reach out to me and they say, I'd like some information about what you do. And I say, look, let's chat, let's talk. Now we do it through Zoom. We have many different avenues that we can connect with people. I say, look, we provide you with the free consultation. And through that process, then I say to them, find somebody you feel you can connect with. Like you talked about with the therapist, find somebody that you feel you can trust and can assist you, that you feel will listen to you. That's more important than anything else in this process, is working with somebody that you feel that will help you and assist you as you move through this experience, because it's fraught with stress and anxiety and opportunities for conflict. So working with a professional, working with somebody who's trained and that you feel will understand you and listen to you can make a big difference.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I mean, and I think it's valid for not only my profession and your profession, but I suspect all other professions that are needed in those situations, which is finding some providers with whom we feel emotionally safe. I mean, we really need that in those circumstances.
Yeah, I'm very grateful. So we're about done, and I was just going to say, one of the things that occurs to me is I'm grateful for relationships like this, because when clients come to me, I have financial advisors, I have realtors, I have folks that I can help and connect them to. So it's a bigger community. So somebody like you that I can say, look, if you need to talk to somebody, let me recommend somebody that I trust, that I feel will help you and assist you. And I think that's the benefit of what we're doing, right? Is building a community that can help people.
Yeah, and hopefully, helping folks, whether it's us or not. I mean, for me, it doesn't really matter. Find resources that are helpful to them.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. I can see our clock is counting down. We have about a minute left, but thank you for your time. Thank you for giving up this time and to share your experiences so that people could learn more. If I could speak English, see, one of the problems of being foreign. Okay, so I was going to ask you a question, but I'm just going to put it out there. We will be posting this video, I believe, on YouTube, and what we're going to do is we're also going to share a link to your website, and so that people can connect with you if they'd like. So please feel free to contact Fabrice if you would like to talk to him about his services, or reach out to me if you want to talk about, or if you have any questions around divorce. We're both more than happy to answer any questions that you might have and maybe point you in the right direction. Did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I want to add something, which is, I've had a chance to talk to you one-on-one without, having the pressure of being viewed by other folks. And I want to share that, on this video, which is, I really, really enjoy talking with you, David. And your energy one-on-one is really, really lovely. So I think people would be very well served to give you a call.
Well, thank you. And thank you again for joining us today. And I think